as a scientist, then I moved into futures research, which is a tremendously important topic, but disappeared. There was no employment. So at the beginning of this century, it was about, what, a dozen years ago, I tried for a job as an energy researcher in the New Zealand government. The first thing I said was, of course, the important question with energy at the moment is the oil peak which is coming, and the response I got was, we don't believe in that. So what happened was that they canned the job and I never got employed. They didn't want to hear about it. They were following in forecast by the International Energy Agency, the IEA, which said that there was tons of oil, there'd be no oil peak, and that 10 years from in 2010, the price would be around about $20 to $25 a barrel. Now, the forecast that I was talking about was not rocket science. You can calculate a coming oil peak fairly easily. Well, it takes a bit of care and get the right data together. The discovery of oil, of new reserves, had peaked some time before 2000. So you could follow the reserves, you add what further discoveries you can expect, you subtract the use, and you find a curve of the likely production. Now, that had been done by Hubbert back in 1956, when he forecast a peak in United States oil production around about 1970. The same process was followed around about 1970 to suggest a global peak would occur around about 2005. That you might notice is just a few years after I was applying for this job, when the New Zealand authorities just didn't believe in this peak. But both of these forecasts were derided. Both of these forecasts were completely accurate. So there can be calculations. There is important science that we should be listening to and not following these wishful thinking and of politicians. And the IEA forecast was extraordinarily wrong. They suggested a price that would stay pretty much stable to around about 2010 at around $25 a barrel, and we all know what happened. After a few years after the oil peak, the oil price had gone to $110 a barrel. That was a peak in conventional oil production. But with the higher prices, other ways of getting at more oil became profitable, and fracking came in. Fracking causes environmental damage locally where it occurs. It produces a lot of greenhouse gases, methane, as well as the carbon dioxide from burning the oil. We all know again what happened then. There was overproduction. The price of oil dropped from its $100 down to about $50 a barrel, and introduced a great instability in the global economy. And throughout all this period, any concern for future generations was ignored, because way back in time in 1970 we all thought it was important, if there were limited resources, to leave some for the use of future generations and not just waste it all quickly on ourselves. Well, that idea has gone. So has concern for the environment, because oil is one of the fossil fuels, we know that, producing greenhouse gases. If we look at the forecasts that have made there, the modelling of greenhouse gases and climate change, we find that the warnings have been very conservative in the past. What has happened has always proved to be worse than the forecast. This is the majority forecast I'm referring to here, because there were a few scientists who were making far stronger forecasts. stronger warnings. For example, Hansen has done some modelling and it's proved accurate, and he's warning very strongly that there could be a considerable rise in sea level before the end of the century by perhaps 7 or 10 metres. This is not a trivial little 1 centimetre every year or two or this sort of thing. We are actually past the limit. And the changes that have been suggested and are being suggested now to deal with oil use, to deal with climate change, are rather little. The carbon tax, for example, is a joke. We have seen that the price can double. It did more than double the price of oil to us at the pump, and social behaviour didn't change very much. So a tax of 10 or 15% is just not going to do the trick. If we're going to deal with this great challenge, we need some fundamental and really significant change. But unfortunately, there's a great deal of resistance to change. We all know about the international oil industry, which wants to keep making its profit and its power and so on. But there are also a lot of pressure from people living here with us. A lot of livelihoods can be threatened if we cut back on the oil use. Roads, trucking, service stations, and what about tourism? Tourism is dependent on people travelling great distance and creating enormous amounts of greenhouse gases to come here, and yet New Zealand is trying its hardest to get more tourists to travel and come here. So if we're to face these type of problems, and this is additional to the problem of population I've mentioned previously, we have to be guided by reality, and we must have a much stronger scientific base to our planning and the way we run our society.